Welcome back, everyone, and today we have a couple more things to look at from Geenie. And these are some that are either the most exciting thing about a smart home ecosystem or the most boring, depending on who you are and what you do with them. And that is a couple of different smart outlet style devices. So we've got the Smart Dot, which is a smart Wi-Fi plug. And these are pretty typical. We've seen these in a lot of ecosystems. I've got a ton of the TP-Link ones from Casa. Paul's looked at some of those. We have the Smart Surge Protector, which is another one. Paul's looked at the TP-Link Casa Surge Protector. And then we've got the Extend, which is a little bit different and not something I've seen before. This is a quad outlet brick, basically. So I'm going to say that's probably the most interesting one for me to get a look at, and we're going to open this one first. Typical labeling from Geenie. We've got Alexa, Google Assistant, says Microsoft Cortana. We know Microsoft canned their smart home system already. Download the app, plug it in, connect to Wi-Fi. They're all Wi-Fi based devices, which has got its advantages and disadvantages. It means it works with everything, but I think we've had Matt, I believe, established that Zigbee and Z-Wave are a little bit more energy efficient on the standby side, although depending on how you use things really dictates that. So let's get this Extend out. All right, so there's the Extend itself. We've got the Are You Happy card and the start guide, which basically says download the app, which we've shown in some of the smart bulb videos, plug it in, add it, enter your network and password information. Pretty straightforward. Input voltage 125 volts, 60 hertz. Maximum load 15 amps, which is 1875 watts. 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi N only. So that's pretty typical. Looks like each of the plugs can be named and controlled individually. Yeah, this is the wireless plug-in remote control adapter. It's 4 outlets. So I am not a huge fan, personally, of the multi-outlet modules that can get plugged in. I find people tend to overload those and that they will twist and pull off the wall if you're not careful. Usually you see those with like 6 or 8. And the big thing that's missing here on some of those is that there would normally be a screw, basically right where this button is. The outlet cover plate would come off and then that screw would go in, which is actually kind of a safety hazard because if something happens and it pulls the outlet from the wall, that cover plate is a layer of protection. It's non-conductive material between you and everything that's there. And not having it is ill-advised. So, a little bit back and forth on that. Design-wise, it's a high-gloss plastic that should help, keep it clean looking. And I'll show you what I'm talking about that in just a second here. Pretty straightforward, single outlet, and then one stud there. Overall, pretty interesting little device. Just a slab of everything. Let's grab a screwdriver and see what's in here. We've already seen Tuya controls on some other Geenie devices, and I'm not going to be entirely surprised if that's what I see here. This is exactly large enough that if somebody wanted to modify it to do additional things, they probably could. I'm going to bet that there's room if you wanted to put like a Raspberry Pi 0W or Pico in here to do something. You could probably find a way to add a 5-volt control or power line for it and add that. Now, what you would do with that, you could probably add like a motion sensor or something. Alright, so there's all 4 screws. So this should just kind of pop apart. Looks like there might be some plastic clips or something in here as well. Yep. All right, a couple of plastic clips and off we go. Yeah, so there's all sorts of room for different things here. So let's see, we've got this little board, which just drives that status LED. There's a couple of capacitors on here, probably some rectification from AC to drive that LED. Nice. Let's grab a power cord here. We'll grab one with a ground plug. Nice separation on all of our AC contacts. Everything seems to be nice and stiff. In fact, almost too stiff. Yep. All right. So let's see. Can I, without damaging anything, liberate this board? So that's encouraging. The ground portion just goes straight to the ground pin, doesn't route through any of the smart circuitry. From a safety standpoint, I like that. That means that there's always a way to get to ground. And I just noticed a screw right here. I basically just want to see the Wi-Fi portion and see who's or what is being used for controls of any sort. I don't really want to do a full teardown on this. We don't have a meter in here. Now, I'll give it credit for this. It is not designed to be disassembled at all. What I find interesting is that it's because I plugged something in. Haha. There we go. All right. So I've got 4 15 amp and 250 volt relays. This would probably work on 240 volts if you were somewhere like the UK, although obviously all the outlet shapes are wrong. And we've got a TYWE3S running the show here. On what appears to be a tiny custom PCB. And we've got 4 LEDs here. Those are the status indicators for the status indicators for the individual outlets, and those all appear to be wired up in such a way that they can be individually controlled. So they've got one red and then two, each one has its own black wire. So they'd be able to, by controlling which one completed the circuit there on what appears to be the neutral side of the outlets, determine which one's which. And it looks like this says L out 4, L out 3, L out 2, L out 1. So they're numbered in such a way that, and of course this could be completely changed in software, that they'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. That is interesting. I'm going to set this aside. I'll put it back together off camera before I get into testing. But, you know, it's 5 screws and some snaps, so nothing too particularly difficult. Actually, before I get too far ahead of myself, I do want to comment that I do think, you know, what I said earlier about a Pi W, potentially, 0W, you could certainly, in the space that this takes up, and let's see, this goes back here. You know, there's certainly room in this top section if you wanted to put a little board in there like that, doing some mods or anything of that nature. So, interesting concept. Let's get to the smart dots next. So these are the Geenie Smart Dot Smart Wi-Fi plug. Basically, I expect these to be the same exact stuff, just in a self-contained unit. There's a note about starting your coffee machine before you even get home. If you're starting the coffee machine, you're probably not awake yet. Most of us don't start the coffee on our way home. You know, set schedules, share access. You can share access in the Geenie app with other people. And these are, does it say which one? They've got 2 different smart dots at this point. And these are the newer version. Not a hugely dramatic difference between them from what I could tell. I think the newer ones are slightly smaller than the old one. But that's really all there is different here. This is an absolutely massive package, though, for those. Honestly, based on the Smart Wi-Fi plug guide, smart voice control guide, same type of stuff that we've seen from them. You know, plug it in, set it up in the app. First step is to have the app. These are itty bitty compared to other smart plugs I've used even. Yeah, Intertech rated. I'm not going to take these apart because there's no screws, so I don't have a way to do it non-destructively. And obviously I want to test these and use them. Let's see, made in China. GNWW217, 125 volts AC, 60 hertz, 10 amp rating, 1250 watt. So that actually puts an interesting point here. These are only rated for 10 amps, which means there are certain devices like a space heater, for example, that I wouldn't necessarily want to control with these, just due to that rating change. Now, that said, these are fairly small, and these are actually back to a more matte plastic. And what I had wanted to highlight was, and I've got some older smart plugs here. I've got a TP-Link HS100 and a TP-Link HS105. These are both 15 amp plugs, interestingly enough. But you can see how much larger they are footprint-wise. The HS105 is a much wider device. It's nowhere near as compact, although it looks like it may take up the same total space. And obviously the HS100, I mean, just look at the size difference between the two plugs. So these are a nice compact plug compared to some of the older ones. Although that may have come at the cost of some of their current rating. 10 amps is honestly good enough for most things. Space heater is really the big ticket item that I don't think you'd want to run at 10 amps. Most of those are going to try and pull 1500 watts, which I think is the limit that you can pull, consistently from an outlet per certain restrictions as far as code's concerned. But everything else you'd want to use a smart plug for, these would be more than enough. Even stuff like a coffee pot is typically going to be a couple hundred watts at most, not 1500. So that's good to see. Now, what I was talking about with the plastic and why I grabbed the TP-Link, you can see that it's kind of got this dinge to it over time. And what's happened is, because this is a porous plastic, just like the Geenie, actually, dirt and dust has kind of settled and gotten rubbed into it, and it's no longer white. Now, how much that bothers you is really up to who you are. And typically it comes clean, and I assume the Geenie ones are going to be no different. That typically if I grab like a Lysol wipe, these will come clean, no problem. But they do show dirt because of that, which is one thing that the smoother plastic on the Extend I did not think was going to cause a problem. All right, that leaves us one final item, and this is the Surge. This is a 6 outlet with one spaced open for like a smart plug. No hub required. Set schedules. Let's see, 125 volt, 60 amp. 125 volt, 60 hertz. 460 joule protection, max load current 10 amps, 802.11N, 2.4 gigahertz. That's kind of a bummer. I was hoping for a 15 amp rating on the Surge, but that's not terrible either. So let's see. We've got some tape here. Same kind of stuff, no hub required. It's Wi-Fi. I already mentioned 802.11N. And same thing with their packaging. I think I'm going to have to send them a note specifically about that some of their products are still in old boxes. Then again, maybe that's why they sent them to me instead of a retail shelf. Come on. Oh, all right, that's a little fiddly there. There's the hanging tag. Same guides, surge protector start guide, voice control guide. I think they print out the same voice control guide for everything. And inside the boxes, yet another box containing the Surge. Oh, and they use the little triangle screws. Okay, so we're not going to open up the Surge today. We might when we do the full review, but my driver for that is not in the studio at the moment. So this is a terrible this is a good illustration of why that last outlet is spaced out, although you'd never plug a smart outlet into a smart strip like that. You can see here they gave you plenty of room to plug a big device in here, although still not enough for 2 of these Geenie plugs, but something like the brick I have for this little battery charger, I can plug in there without interfering with the outlets next to it, assuming I'm trying to plug something sane sized in there. That's good. I like seeing that on power strips. It doesn't add a whole ton of cost to space out that last outlet like that. But it does add a whole ton of convenience for the end user. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 individual LEDs to tell you which outlet is on or off at any given time. Cord is not bad, decent rubber jacket. Let's see here if there's a rating on it. 300 volts, 60 Celsius, 14 gauge. That's not bad. 12 gauge would have been better, but it's only rated for 10 amps on the strip itself, so 14 is fine, especially for only a 3-foot lead. 209 millimeters squared times 3. And then we've got, is there a fuse in the plug as well? No fuse in the plug. But we've got our little on-off button on the end here, which, that's very satisfying sounding. Alright, so this is the Geenie Surge. This does come in a smaller variant as well. This is the 6. I want to say the smaller is 4 outlets, might be 3. I'll correct myself in post. So what do you do with these? I said these were either exciting or boring, depending on what you want them for. You can, here's a good example. I use them at work. I use them to turn screens on for signage. These little dots, that's actually why I have these TP-Link ones, is that we got a bunch of the Casa ones at work on a ridiculous deal and put them behind a bunch of screens to control them. That's fantastic. You can use them for lighting around Christmas time. Geenie even has, although we're not looking at them right now, some outdoor rated ones for your outdoor Christmas lights. Use it to turn a lamp that's hard to reach on or off without having to put a smart plug on it. Without having to install individual smart lights on it. Depending on the fixtures you're dealing with, that may actually be quite the cost saver there. Something like these Geenie Smart plugs are going to run like $20 for a 2-pack. So that's $10 per device. And I want to say the Surge here is listed at about 30. And it is 4 outlets for the small one, but it does gain a couple of USB ports. So that's nice as well. I may send them a note about getting one of the ones with USB. Because that's a fantastic combination. So depending on what you do really determines how much sense these make. Now, obviously each one of these has a different place that it's going to be best for. A Surge or the Extend, something like an entertainment center. Which, does the Extend have a protection rating on it as well? Surge protection, 600 joules. Well, that's interesting. The Extend has a higher joule rating than the actual strip does, and of course the plugs don't have any surge protection rating. Interesting. Anyway, an entertainment center where you've got a TV and a receiver and a set of speakers and devices like that you want to be able to turn on and off on demand, is an excellent application for this. I know this is probably going to be something that I'm told is ill-advised per Microsoft or Sony, but those consoles sitting on in their standby modes can pull down a decent amount of power. So if you want to say, okay, if I'm not using it, the console can be on from, I don't know, 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. to run updates, and then turn it off unless I turn it on. Well, that's actually the kind of thing you could do with one of these. Because those schedules are, this is when I turn it on, this is when I turn it off, not it will be off until this time. Another application that I've used this style for, and I know Paul, our editor-in-chief, has as well, computers that are hard to reboot or that you need to power cycle on any kind of regular basis. Good example. I have some systems that are 30 feet in the air. I just can't get to them if something locks them up. And I've made provisions to have, VNC over network, and I have a Logitech K600 TV that's paired with each one, so I have a physical way of interacting if the network goes down. Well, that's great up until it's just hard locked. If it blue screens, if it just hangs, I have one of these, which may or may not be the most graceful way of restarting a system, but at least gives me something that I can say, okay, it's locked, it's screwed up, I can open up the app on my phone, and I can turn the plug off, and I can turn it back on, and wait for the system to restart. Let's see, what other stuff do they show these things being used for? They show them with lamps. They show them with home theater systems, which I already mentioned. More lighting. Not very creative on the box, guys. Coffee pot. So, coffee pot's a good one. Slow cooker, that kind of stuff. Get it prepped in the morning, tell it to turn it on at a certain time, come home, have dinner ready. Very attractive type configuration there. So, I don't know, that's the kind of stuff that comes to mind right away. I'm sure someone, and tell me in the description below, and maybe I'll test it if I can, has something interesting and more exciting than any of my normal boring house maintenance type things that they can do with a smart plug. So, let me know in the comments below, and we'll be putting all these through their paces. Oh, there's one. I use a smart plug, and I'll actually put one of these in the place of the TP-Link one that I've got there right now, to turn my dehumidifier on every day. Especially this time of year, I get condensation in my studio because of how cold it is, the concrete wall. If it is too humid in the basement, I get condensation. I'm sure you may have noticed in some of the videos there have been what look like water spots on my bench top here, and well, that's because that's what they are. And I didn't know about that when I set my studio up. So there's one of your applications right there as well. All right. I want to thank Geenie for sending these in. We're always happy to look at products when people send them in. It always makes it easier on me as well. I want to thank Electrix for providing our opening. I want to thank anyone who helps support Pocketables, either by using our Amazon affiliate links or by supporting us on Patreon. It is support like that that helps make videos like this possible. And, yes, it's great that some of the stuff gets sent in by the companies for review, but just as often we have things we need to pick up to make the reviews possible, accessories that aren't included, or sometimes we just want to buy it outright because we just want to tear it apart. And not everyone's okay with sending us stuff to do that. So support either via Amazon or Patreon, or I think Paul has a Bitcoin link on the main website. Really does help make stuff like this possible. I want to thank Electrix for providing our opening and closing themes. And finally, thank you for watching.